which is going to be taking place in Providence. So we're going to have to leave you a little before 4 to get down there for the rehearsal dinner. Otherwise, there will be no marriage tomorrow. And with your permission, if it's okay, Alan, with you and Twan, and it's all right with the rest of you, I think we probably ought to extend this for perhaps another half an hour, because I think we really need some pretty lively discussion. So we're going to leave you a little before 4. I hope I can turn it over to you, Alan, to kind of moderate things. Let me just raise a few issues here, one of which I've already raised, which is, for those of us who are deeply involved in health policy, the issue of electronic records and the expenditure of literally billions of dollars on electronic records is something that's been occupying the healthcare debate for a long time. I have to tell you, in listening to your presentation, that I began wondering, how did we ever get into this thing in the first place? You know, maybe simple paper records that are very difficult to intercept in an area as sensitive as this, and especially as you describe the situation in that mental health clinic. It's really kind of frightening. And folks, when I tell you we have spent billions on this, I'm not kidding. Every doctor has been forced to do this. All health institutions are forced to do this. And there isn't the slightest evidence that it's reduced costs, which is what we were told the electronic records would do in the first place. And secondly, although I think perhaps we ought to hold a really robust discussion of this to our last meeting of the year, all of these principles sound good to me. But I'm sorry to be pragmatic about this. Who's going to enforce all of this? At a time when it sounds to me as if we're in a kind of Wild West period when it comes to the hostile use of cyber. And this country, needless to say, isn't blameless either. I mean, Stuxnet wasn't a figment of the imagination. It was a deliberate attempt to interfere and, if not destroy, badly mess up the information system in the Iranian nuclear program. And we know that other countries are doing exactly the same thing. I mean, I think this is the first time an American presidential campaign has had to put up with foreign-generated information, which is a factor in the campaign, or maybe a factor in the campaign. So, in your discussion today, perhaps in a preliminary way, and then in a more thorough way, I think we really have to now decide, all right, these principles are great. Who's going to enforce them? I mean, or are we going to continue with what seems to me to be a system in which the expenditure of public funds for cyber warfare and its related activities are already, in my judgment, almost out of control. And somebody's got to bring this back. In any event, he can be part of the discussion, but we got to get on with this discussion here.
Yes.
So, the floor is open. John, want to kick things
I'll
off?
jump in by saying that I think that the digitization of medical records was started too early. Because I believe that the standards had not evolved. What should have happened is experiments should have been done, and you should have seen what works and what doesn't work. And then I think that doctors who are extraordinarily busy people and have a lot of expenses associated with their operations needed perhaps some subsidies to get started.
Well, they've gotten substantial subsidies.
But on the flip side of this is that if you have digital health records and you can access them remotely, then you can break a hip in Seattle, as I did at the end of March. And you can have a lot of your history available to you to the doctor in Seattle, which wasn't the case. All right, so there are advantages to this, but there are also a lot of disadvantages. And in particular, what we have to do is, as many have said already, is you have to focus on security. You have to elevate the level of security. And what you have to acknowledge as well is security is very difficult to achieve. There's so many ways to violate it. So it has to be a collective enterprise. We have to persuade, as we are doing slowly over time, governments around the world that they have a responsibility to marshal their people to work together to elevate the level of security. And it can be done. There are some good best practices that you can follow that will go a long way to, as you've heard already, to elevate security.
Yeah, and let me say this, folks, this is not a US problem. I mean, many other healthcare systems are far ahead of us to the degree of the extent to which they digitize records and use them routinely. So I assume they're facing, Alan, the same set of problems that we're facing. But I think John is right. I mean, before we start jumping into some of this stuff, especially in an area as sensitive as healthcare, or for that matter, mental health, we better make sure we know what we're doing.
And another way of putting it is, if you're going to formulate policy, this is one of my pet themes, if you're going to formulate policy that's going to affect technology, and you don't have technologists at the table, you're making a mistake. I mean, we back in the United States, back in the 80s, passed the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And we said, basically, if you enter someone else's computer without their permission, it's the same equivalent to entering a person's home when the door is unlocked and you walk out with something. The law says that if you do that to someone's home, it's a crime. So by extension, the same should apply to computers. And then along came the internet and the browser, and we connected our computers to the internet, and basically we said, come and get it. You're free to take anything that you can find on my computer. And we were not cognizant of that, and we didn't anticipate that when the law was written. So the law should be changed. That's an example of a failure to integrate technologists with policy makers at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, the bad guys out there are way ahead of the rest of us, it seems to me. And one of the questions is, are we going to be able to catch up?
Well, we're living with it. I mean,
Okay.
I use electronic banking.
I don't. I send my deposits by mail to Citizens Bank at a Providence, Rhode Island address. Yes, I do. And have no problems when it comes to hacking my accounts. I mean, any other thoughts on this, folks? I mean, I think it's a classic example of where, we're really running behind the...
I would just add, that there's no one thing that some group can do to legislate all of this, but there are some huge building blocks. The comment I made about the law that Governor Cuomo wants to pass in New York about holding CEOs accountable, I saw it happen with insider trading, I saw it happen with firm financials. If you simply passed a law that said, if your firm holds health records, the CEO needs to sign off. The situation Rod described wouldn't have happened. They wouldn't have said it doesn't matter, we can just sue somebody. I mean, that's one step that would have dramatic impact, and it's been done at least twice before.
Any other thoughts on this?
Well, from the geopolitical perspective, I study international relations and state-to-state cyber. We have not old minds, but we have old ways of thinking about the cyber realm, especially from the Cold War. We need to be offense dominant. We need to deter somehow, but that's not really how the cyber domain works. So we need to think about how we should confront our adversaries about this, like Russia and China, with Russia being kind of very prominent right now with what's going on with our election. So how do we handle Russia in this context? We should probably separate it from the other disagreements we have with Russia, like Syria and Ukraine and things like that. Talk about the cyber realm, find common ground with Russia and China, because they're autocratic states, we're democratic states. We see the internet in one way, they see the internet in another. It's more about sovereignty and control. Us, it's freedom of information and keeping things open. So where can we find the common ground? Well, it's the intellectual property issue, it's the SCADA systems, things like that. And then maybe we can start building these normative systems. What I would argue that sanctioning military threats are probably not the answer. We need to sit down at the table, like what you promoted through this forum. I think that's the way to go, is to really kind of sit down with these people.
Can I follow up and tell you?
Can I hold you for just a second, because I want Senny to get into this. Senny Mari. Yeah.
My name is Koichi Hamada. Japan faces both many
A little louder.
kind of risks. First is political, as Abe becomes more and more conspicuous. And also, Japanese industries are beaten by stealing of technology and so we discussed lots of personal domain or political domain, but the industrial aspects are very important. And when I had most of discussion I had, it's like discussing how to behave on the street when wild drivers are around. So as already told, sanctions to those who violate the rule should be more important, even though the latter is also important, that we should make out the incidence of violence to the minimum. Another observation is about the degree of cyber protection. I am an economist, very little with cyber safety, but in Tokyo 2 days ago and yesterday here, FOMOC or similar type of meeting were going on. And however, in Japan I heard, in order to finish the policy, they had to get some endorsement, even though Ministry of Finance doesn't have the right to revoke BOJ's, Bank of Japan's decision, but they are to be informed. And that information form is not to be done by internet because it's dangerous. So they stopped the meeting for 1 hour or half an hour in order for the ministry to endorse certain Bank of Japan meeting. So too much protection sometimes creates problem. I shouldn't get into politics, but I have a little bit of sympathy with Hillary Clinton, that every of her message should be given password of very long one and so on.
Feel free to get into politics, because this is a highly political situation.
I was going to bring it down to the mundane by simply saying that at MIT the security is really moving up, and I cannot access the website of my own course.
Of your own
without
course?
Course, yes, without going through a whole set of security steps. So it's a major inconvenience, no problem, but how much inconvenience?
So my friend said the secret for Apple is how to make complex things easy to, and that part of thinking is also needed in this cyber safety program.
We're going to head out. Llewellyn, you're
Yes,
on,
thank you,
and Alan, I'm going to ask you
Chairman.
to continue moderating the discussion. Thank you all. We look forward to seeing you.
Have a good program.
You stay here. I got to go down.
You're going out of state, huh?